I will also update the House on the fiscal performance for the year 2024. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal performance in the year 2024 was characterized by improved revenue collection, but with significant expenditure overruns. In addition, large arrests were accumulated over the period. Mr. Speaker, in summary, the provisional data shows the following. 1. Primary balance on commitment basis, the key fiscal anchor of the IMF program, worsened from a deficit of 0.2% of GDP at the end of 2023 to a deficit of 3.9% of GDP at the end of the year 2024. This is 4.4 percentage points worse than the target surplus of 0.5% of GDP. Sadly, Mr. Speaker. On cash basis, Mr. Speaker, the primary balance was a deficit of 1.2% of GDP against a target of 0.6% of GDP, representing a 100% deviation. Mr. Speaker, the overall fiscal balance on commitment basis for 2024 was a deficit of 7.9% of GDP against a target of 4.2% of GDP, while the overall fiscal balance on cash basis was a deficit of 5.2% of GDP against a target of 5.3% of GDP. Total revenue and grant amounted to 186.6 billion Ghana cedis, or 15.9% of GDP, 5.3% above the revised target of 177.2 billion Ghana cedis, or 17.4% of GDP. The performance was mainly driven by higher than programmed oil and gas receipt and higher non-oil tax revenue collection. Total expenditure on commitment basis, including discrepancies, amounted to 279.2 billion, or 23.7% of GDP. This is 27.1% above the budget provisions of the year 2024, Mr. Speaker. The primary balance on commitment basis, including discrepancies, amounted to 232.4 billion, or 19.8% of GDP. This is 35.3% above the target of 171.7 billion, or 16.8% of GDP. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, all expenditure lines exceeded their respective targets for the period, except for interest payments, goods and service, and other expenditures. Right Honourable Speaker, the discrepancies for the year 2024 being unclassified expenditure was 3.8 billion Ghana cedis as compared to 12.9 billion Ghana cedis in the year 2023. Mr. Speaker, at the end of December 2024, provisional data indicate that gross central government and guaranteed debt was 726.7 billion from 610 billion in 2023. This represents 61.8% of GDP in 2024 compared to 68.7% in the year 2023. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive to note that the debt to GDP ratio and the dollar component of our debt that has come down, that has reduced, is as a result of the 37% haircut on principal of Eurobond debt under the debt restructuring. Mr. Speaker, it is important to know that. Mr. Speaker, Right Honourable Speaker, it is instructive to note that the debt to GDP that has reduced is as a result of the 37% haircut on principal and interest that were given to Eurobond bondholders. So, Speaker, you may recall that the government commenced the debt restructuring program in the year 2022 to restore debt sustainability and economic stability. As of now, the restructuring process is approximately 93% completed. The remaining 7% relate to debt of $2.7 billion owed to commercial creditors. We are committed to completing the remaining debt restructuring as soon as possible. So, Speaker, real sector development in the year 2024. Right Honourable Speaker, provisional 2024 GDP statistics published by the Ghana Statistical Service on the 10th of March 2025 shows that overall real GDP growth increase. So, Speaker, at the end of increase to 5.7% in the year 2024. So, Speaker, I take that again. So, Speaker, provisional 2024 GDP statistics published by the Ghana Statistical Service on the 10th of March 2025 show that overall GDP growth grew by 5.7% of GDP in the year 2027, compared to the growth rate of 3.1% recorded over the same period. Mr. Speaker, the key driver of this growth was largely coming from gold mine. Mr. Speaker, including Galamsey. Including Galamsey. Mr. Speaker, Galamsey growth cannot be sustainable. Mr. Speaker, non-oil GDP growth. Mr. Speaker, the non-oil GDP grew by 0.6% in the year 2024, compared with the growth rate of 3.6% recorded in 2023. Mr. Speaker, the gross international reserves increased to a stock position of $8.98 billion at the end of 2024 and was enough to cover 4 months of imports, exceeding the target of a floor of 3 months of import cover. At the end of 2024, the currency had depreciated by 19.2% against the US dollars, 17.8% against the euro, against the British pound, Mr. Speaker, and it had depreciated by 13.7% against the euro. Mr. Speaker, Right Honourable Speaker, it is what it is. The state of our economy is troubling, but we will fix it. Mr. Speaker, touch wood, we will fix it. But Mr. Speaker, it will require some sacrifices, truthfulness, transparency, and discipline. We will take strong measures to confront the situation head on. Mr. Speaker, the sacrifice must come from all stakeholders, beginning with the government. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President appreciates this and has led the charge by significantly downsizing his government from the Elephant 88 to the Umbrella 60. Mr. Speaker, he has also reduced the number of his government ministries from the Elephant 30 to the Umbrella 23. Mr. Speaker, as part of the contribution to the resetting agenda, organized labor has followed suit by working with government and employers association to agree on a modest 10% increase in base pay and minimum wage for the year 2025. Right Honourable Speaker, on behalf of His Excellency the President, I would like to express my profound gratitude to organized labor and employers. Mr. Speaker, ordinary Ghanaians have also sacrificed by enduring the negative impact of severe currency depreciation since 2022. Hyperinflation, high food inflation, principal and interest haircuts, soaring interest rates, among others. Mr. Speaker, it is now time for the people's representative, the members of Parliament, and the judiciary to also follow suit. I would like to call on all other stakeholders, including the business community, faith-based organizations, academia, and civil society to support this national call. So, Speaker, our immediate task is to reset our nation, to restore good governance, reduce the excruciating suffering of our people, and set our country on a trajectory of economic transformation. So, Speaker, our vision is to build a prosperous and a democratic state, anchored on the principles of freedom and justice, providing equal opportunities for all. Mr. Speaker, through this vision, we will work together to build the Ghana we want. Right Honourable Speaker, the resetting agenda will be anchored on the following. 1. Restoring hope in our democracy, renewing trust in public officials, and helping every Ghanaian attain their full potential. Offering a trusted hand to the vulnerable, particularly women and youth, and creating a new Ghana for coming generations. And finally, stimulating demand by patronizing made-in-Ghana goods under the 24-hour economy. Mr. Speaker, today I came to this chamber with made-in-Ghana bag, signifying, Mr. Speaker, with made-in-Ghana bag, Mr. Speaker, I would like to first present, Mr. Speaker, they don't know that in Ghana we sew suits. Right, Honourable Speaker, I would like to first present the government's immediate and strong measures to address the current challenges we are confronted with, followed by the medium-term vision, policy objectives and targets. Right, Honourable Speaker, consistent with Section 14 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 911, the fiscal policy objectives of this government is to support the economic transformation agenda to ensure the macroeconomic stability of the country within the macroeconomic and fiscal framework. More specifically, the fiscal policy objective of the government include the following: rationalizing government expenditure and eliminating wasteful expenditures, optimizing domestic revenue mobilization through broadening of tax base, increased non-tax revenue collection, adopting enhanced tax compliance measures, and modernizing the tax administration through digital technology. Mr. Speaker, we will also increase the share of domestic expenditure to spur economic growth and job creation. We'll be reducing public debt to sustainable levels and adopting prudent debt management practice to support debt sustainability. Reducing the fiscal deficit progressively in accordance with the amended Fiscal Responsibility Act to promote fiscal and debt sustainability. And Mr. Speaker, restoring confidence in the Ghana economy. Right Honourable Speaker, our approach will be to foster economic growth, accelerate job creation, reduce inflation, and stabilize the cedi. To achieve this, it is crucial that we establish the macroeconomic stability and ensure debt sustainability. Mr. Speaker, we are confident that by prioritizing these fundamental elements, we can cultivate an environment where individuals can prosper and businesses can thrive in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, Ghanaians, through the recent National Economic Dialogue, have expressed a clear desire for fiscal deficit and public debt to be reduced through cuts in government spending rather than through only tax measures. We wholeheartedly agree. Mr. Speaker, going forward, we will tailor our expenditure to align with our fiscal realities. After all, whoever pays off their debt gets rich. Mr. Speaker, we are poised to implement a three-pronged approach to achieve our objective, beginning with this budget immediately. First will be to recalibrate the fiscal adjustment, and we believe that by prioritizing spending-led fiscal adjustment can initiate a positive cycle. Fiscal adjustment can initiate a positive cycle in a way that first, it will help lower inflation and curb depreciation of the cedi. Secondly, it will lessen government reliance on borrowing, which in turn will reduce the crowding out of private sector and lower interest rates. Lastly, this approach will ease the strain on monetary policy, allowing the central bank some greater flexibility to reduce monetary policy rates, ultimately resulting in lower bank and lending rates. Mr. Speaker, the second approach will be to deliver a shock therapy. Mr. Speaker, we are implementing a form of shock therapy to the economy by making significant spending cuts this year, thereby reducing the government financing needs and front-loading fiscal adjustment. This is the down payment for our policy credibility and credit worthiness. Right Honourable Speaker, our third approach will be to restore fiscal responsibility. By moving forward, we will enhance public financial management by empowering ministers to effectively manage their budget on their own, ensuring strict compliance with the commencement certificate. Mr. Speaker, we'll be passing and enforcing a revised Fiscal Responsibility Act, and finally, we will enforce the sanction regime for non-compliance of the Public Financial Management Act. Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of the overarching macroeconomic objectives, the following macroeconomic targets have been set for the year 2025. Overall real GDP growth of at least 4% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, not less non-oil real GDP growth of at least 4.8% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, end period inflation rate of 11.9%. Mr. Speaker, primary balance on commitment basis of a surplus of 1.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, gross international reserves, including oil funds and encumbered assets, to cover not more than a minimum of 3 months of import. Mr. Speaker, to address inflation, government will implement a number of measures to complement the Bank of Ghana and monetary authorities. Mr. Speaker, the measures to stabilize the exchange rate include the following. We will be establishing the Ghana Gold Board to enhance the generation of accumulation of forex to support the stability of the Ghana cedi. The Bank of Ghana will continue to implement its FX forward auction to support the stability of the Ghana cedi. Government strong fiscal consolidation through the reduction in public sector spending and the fiscal deficit will reduce the pressure on the exchange rate. And Mr. Speaker, our import substitution drive under the 24-hour economy involving domestic production of key products originally imported will reduce import and related FX requirements, boding well for FX stability. Right Honourable Speaker, we are addressing the inflation problems through a number of measures, including the following. First, specific interventions, including the Agriculture for Economic Transformational Agenda, is expected to increase food production and reduce food inflation. Government will implement policies that target items with large weight in the CPI basket, such as transportation and utility, to reduce their prices. Mr. Speaker, our aggressive fiscal consolidation drive aimed at reducing the fiscal deficit and borrowing will contribute significantly to reducing inflationary pressures. Right Honourable Speaker, our strategy to improve exchange rate stability will reduce imported inflation and fuel prices. And Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Ghana will maintain an appropriate monetary policy stance and use its liquidity management interventions to support the disinflation process. Right Honourable Speaker, to achieve our expenditure-led fiscal consolidation objectives, we will implement the following measures. Mr. Speaker, I now take you to our expenditure measures. Mr. Speaker, the following expenditure measures will be implemented in 2025 and the medium term to support fiscal consolidation agenda. First, we will conduct a comprehensive audit to validate the quantum of arrests and commitment as at 31st December 2024. Mr. Speaker, the mandatory use of blanket purchase order to capture multi-year commitment contracts in line with our medium-term expenditure ceilings will be implemented. We will amend the Public Procurement Act to provide for an independent value for money office to scrutinize government procurement. Mr. Speaker, we will also work with Parliament to amend the Public Procurement Act to make commencement certificate and budgetary provision a prerequisite for all procurement that will be paid by the central government. Mr. Speaker, we will fully integrate GANEPS and GIFMIS to ensure that only MDA's projects and purchase orders that have approved budget and allotment can obtain procurement approvals. Mr. Speaker, we will operationalize the compliance desks at the Ministry of Finance to monitor reports on commitment and arrest accumulation. Mr. Speaker, aside that, we will publish a PFM league table for compliance purposes. We will strictly enforce sanctions under the sections 96 to 98 of the Public Financial Management Act for breaches of the PFM Act, specifically those that relate to arrest accumulation and commitment control. Right, Honourable Speaker, we will cut waste and we will cut it very deep. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, we have selected expenditure items including the Ghana Cares, the U-Start, One District, One Factory for complete elimination. Mr. Speaker,